All right, now it is my honor to introduce this morning's keynote. Her name is Fernanda Carapina. Fernanda is a serial media and tech entrepreneur, former senior entertainment exec, and executive producer and writer with over 20 years of experience in the entertainment technology business. Fernanda's new venture, We Global Studios, is a full-stack innovation venture studio and members-only startup Founderverse. It's also an AI-driven platform that powers the success of women entrepreneurs around the world. Previously, as Senior Vice President of Television at Brillstein Gray Communications, Fernanda co-ran all aspects of the television development and production process. Additionally, Fernanda is a published author of young adult science fiction / fantasy graphic novels. She's originally from Portugal and now resides in LA. Folks, please join me in welcoming Fernanda.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, St. Paul. It's so great to be here with all of you. I'm very excited to start my world tour here. I'm actually headed out to the EU shortly after this for another series of exciting presentations. I wanted to chat with you today about something that's so near and dear to my heart, and Anne discussed it briefly when she talked about product innovation. And what I'd like to really focus on is human innovation, and that'll really be the topic of our discussion today. And I really feel so strongly about it that when I founded We Global, it became the first pillar of excellence that we focus all of our energy and resources and advisory towards when we work with female founders. Because as many of you probably can appreciate, an investor invests in the founder just as much as he or she does in the product. And some would argue, especially early stages, that it's really all about the founder. So how do you up the ante when you're sitting in front of an investor and convince them that you're a fundable CEO? So that's an expression that's often used in our business. Is she a fundable CEO? And as women, we have a much higher bar that we unfortunately have to meet. And that's really part of the rigor of our company, is making sure that our female founders are prepared for the real world and are prepared to really present as a confident and capable founder. As myself, I was a senior executive at, I've worked at Lifetime, I've worked at ABC, I've worked at Paramount, I've worked at a lot of large corporations, so I'm not a stranger to corporate life. And I've spent a number of years now as an entrepreneur. What I love about the entrepreneurial business is that you have incredible freedom to craft your culture, your business, your priorities. You're not beholden to anyone else's agenda. And I think that's fabulous. The negative part of starting your own business, as many of you may know, it's kind of like changing the wheels on a moving car. It's the epitome of agility. There really is no time to stop, think, and ponder, because you're on a limited timeline, you're on a limited budget, you have limited time to get to market, and you have to be good at everything. I myself am a very good horizontal thinker, and that's helped me in my career. It's hindered me at some point, because I think until recently, HR departments don't know what to do with people like myself. You're good at this, you're good at that, you've done a little bit of that, you've done a little bit of this, but how good are you in this specific vertical? And I think that's unfortunate, because I think corporate America is suffering and will suffer, and that's one of the primary reasons, is that organizations like Indeed and other organizations that search for people are still being programmed with algorithms that are really out of date. I think in this day and age, you need to hire people that have done just the most obscure things, because the transfer of knowledge from someone who is a great chef and knows how to put together ingredients, and someone who perhaps is excellent in finance, or maybe is also a great writer, you never know when those skills can be merged and when you can connect the dots. And the future is really all about connecting the dots. So, what is the intersection of business, psychology, and the human psyche? I think, quite frankly, that is the future. I did, after my stint in entertainment, took some time off, started independent producing, started writing, became a science fiction author after all the work I'd done at Paramount working on Star Trek and other projects that they had there. And then went back to school and got a master's in psychology. Did a complete pivot of my career, which, as those who know me, I am kind of fearless about pivoting. And have then spent 3 years working in inner city schools as a therapist and working with kids. And to this day, that was probably my greatest honor, greatest challenging job, most rewarding job. And really appreciated, I think, the power of self-image, the power of story, and the power of community to really transform people. It was interesting because I went to a public school. My parents immigrated to the United States with a 6th grade education. We didn't have a lot of money. I was fortunate enough I went to an Ivy League school. But for them, they didn't even know what Ivy League really meant. They would have been happy if I was a bagger at Stop and Shop. It was like a steady job. It was all about security. And so I always had a great education in my life. When I went to work for Animo Inglewood, which is a charter public school system in Los Angeles, which takes over failing LA Unified Schools, literally in the bowels of LA, worst neighborhoods, crime, violence. Most of my clients were 14, 15, 16-year-old gang members, men and women. I had one that was locked in an office with a college counselor or a counselor who she threatened to beat up, and the police were brought in. So there was always something. But what I thought was interesting about the school is they did something so simple that was so powerful. They took a school that had an 80% dropout rate, and they turned it within a year to an 80% graduation rate. Now, what corporate company wouldn't want that kind of statistic? And you know what they did? Does anybody have any idea what they did? Can someone just raise their hand, shout it out? You guys are not agile thinkers. Come on.
Built relationships.
Okay, built relationships. Anybody else? They listened. Built confidence. Anyone else? So all of those things are true. But the one thing they did, and the one thing that really works universally, is they set an expectation. They put posters all over the school that basically said, you're going to college in 4 years. It became the culture of the school. So there was a bar that was set, and the kids met it. Very simple. No one had ever done that for them. And we experience that at work, right? You have a to-do list, your boss tells you we expect you to do this. And as entrepreneurs, we also do that. But sometimes we don't really think about what it is that we're actually setting off to do fully. You do, because you have other people above you who are saying you need to do this by such and such a time. But when you think about your own life and you step out of being an employee and you think about yourself as an individual, right? Where are you going and why are you going there? It's an important question, and I think that's why the Great Exit is happening. Because people are awakening to the fact that they're getting older and they're like, why am I doing this job? I think COVID opened all our eyes to the fact that the world is changing, and unfortunately, we're all going to die at some point, and people are looking for meaning in the work that they do. And they're looking for a great work environment, and they're looking to have an impact. The younger generation certainly is very much on that boat. I have a 14-year-old daughter who recently told me she's stopped listening to a particular rapper because they discovered that he had been abusing women. And she goes, I love his music so much, but I won't listen to him. I've taken him off my Spotify list. And I thought, it's just a different time, right? These young kids really live an aligned life, like no bullshit. They are authentically living their lives in a way that may annoy us greatly because they're defiant, they don't listen. But unlike the way I was raised, where my dad only had to look at me a certain way and I would, run and do whatever he needed me to do. So that is one of the things that is changing our future in corporate America, and that's why I think a lot of companies are going to be going under. They're going to be going under for a lot of reasons. One primary reason is that they haven't really, they haven't drank from the Kool-Aid yet that agility is really key, and they need to completely transform. And many of them are still making money, so they're not transforming. Meanwhile, there's an 18-year-old kid in his garage that's going to destroy and disrupt the business model in a second. So let's talk about what you do versus who you are and what really drives success. So a lot of us, myself included, when someone turns to you and they say, Bob, what do you do? People typically kind of discuss their business experience. And they'll talk about their title. And I know when I left the business, which, Hollywood is, it's Hollywood, politics, and probably the mob, three industries that are very aligned. And now I'll add Silicon Valley. It's so much a club. It's who you know. It's all about who you know. It's all about access. If you have access, life is easy. If you don't have access, very hard. Very, very hard. The walls are very high. To get meetings takes a lot. So when I left the business and I was on my own, I no longer had that business card with that big company name that got you in the door, got you invited to parties, and you were nothing in the eyes of a business community. It really forced me to look within to develop my own superpower and identity as an entrepreneur. And that was well over 15 years ago now. So what does really drive success? Let's just throw out some notions that you have. Anyone? Talent? Risk? Perseverance. Passion. How about in the back? Anybody? Purpose. Okay, those are all good answers. But here's something that you may not know. That 20% of success is driven by mechanics. Think about that. And we spend our whole life mastering that exterior world. That means that all education, all workshops, all jobs are really focused on the mechanics. It's the how, it's the what, it's the when, it's the product, all of that. And that's not what drives success. That's why you probably know someone who's super successful and they were a total jerk in college. Or they weren't that smart, and you were so much smarter, and now they have this big company, maybe they even went public, and you're thinking, how in God's name did that happen, So what does drive success? 80% of success is driven by psychology. Does anyone teach psych in a corporate America? No, they don't. In fact, up until recently, this would be considered laughable, but it's really not. And I'll tell you why it's not. Because human innovation is more important than any innovation because the bots are coming. The bots are coming. And I'll tell you why I know so much about bots. My company prior to this one, which was 4Digital, was a behavioral data analytics company. And I founded it with several guys. One was a hacker, a white hat, not a black hat, although he turned out to be a black hat. But, so never get involved with a hacker. And of course, I had this great chief data scientist with all kinds of security clearances who's amazing. So we set off to really look at social media and verify human behavior on social media so that we could do what Elon Musk alleged, which was that Twitter was full of bots, and he was right. all the research we did 10 years ago, 50% of the activity on Twitter was bot activity. It wasn't really humans. So we've spent so much time looking natural language processing, looking at behavior, looking at posts, looking at timing, all these things to really determine human versus non-human. And what we discovered over time was it became harder and harder for us to do the work because the bot activity became more and more human. The cadence became more and more human. Because the people programming all that, because there is a Wall Street that exists underground, and they're much better funded than our Wall Street, and incredibly talented men and women, we're adjusting the algorithm so that the timing, the cadence, what was said, et cetera, really started to mirror us. Therefore, I'm joking about bots coming, but they are coming. So if you're involved in an activity that is repetitive, you will be replaced. You will be replaced. And I'm actually going to Portugal to attend the Web Summit, which is the largest gathering of tech professionals in the world. And so they say, anyway, that's their marketing pitch. So there'll be 80,000 people there. And when my company was selected to showcase and pitch, and part of my pitch is really about the necessity of changing the innovation industry, the actual engine, because the innovation industry, in reality, in my humble opinion, is one of the most archaic, ass-backward industries that exists in the United States. And why is that? Because it's run like a cottage industry. It's run identically to Hollywood. And I know that world. You spend your days taking pitch meetings with writers, producers. This is a good idea. This is a bad idea. You only want to meet with people who have done it before, have some success under their belt, because you don't want to take the risk. Well, how does a young writer actually get a show done? How do you get new voices if you're just hiring the same people over and over again? And you at home are watching the same content created by the same 20 guys with the same messaging, same casting, same profiling of human beings. And if you don't think that doesn't have an impact on you, it does. So how do you mix it up? Well, in Hollywood, we got disrupted big time. It's called YouTube, right? We used to have big content producers who would make a movie, and they would easily make $5, $10 million on a movie set. Now, they're making 1/10 of that, because you've got some dude in like Iowa who's 16, who's got 20 billion followers, drops a sweatshirt and makes $10 million in 5 minutes. No joke. So the business has been disrupted in Hollywood. Everyone is a content creator. My goal is to make everyone an entrepreneur and to provide a system and a platform where you're not reinventing the wheel in order to do so. It's incredibly archaic and ridiculous and a complete waste of time. So how do you master this inner world? So that's where it lives. I call it the power vertex. The vertex is where 3 points meet, also known as the radical center, when you have 3 circles meet. So it's really this integration of business knowledge mixed with psychology and the human psyche. And that little bubble down below that says the human you see worlds, that stands for unconscious and conscious. So you all know your conscious habits and the way that you lead your life, obviously. You're aware of it. You're aware of your faults. You're aware of your behaviors. You're aware of your maybe inconsistencies, destructive behavior, positive behavior, procrastination. Maybe you fib every once in a while. But what do you really understand about your unconscious, and how does that unconscious drive the decisions that you make and the relationships that you have? And how is it in alignment with what you want to do and what you want to be? It's a lot for 9 o'clock, right? So this is really more like a martini conversation, quite frankly. So let's explore some perspectives so that I can challenge you. So this was created for founders, but I think it's actually more relevant for you. And I think because for founders, this is in the culture, right? Because we have to do this. for you guys, it's a little different. So let's look at the word the leader. So this is what we say. What it is not. It's not the boss. It's not the answer, and it's not the executor. And you're like, okay, what the hell is the leader? So anyone, throw out a word. What do you think the leader is? Organizer. The organizer. Visionary. The what? Visionary. Visionary. The what? The encourager. Storyteller. Okay. The one that empowers. It's interesting you should say that, because one of my pet peeves is the word empowerment, especially as it pertains to underserved, underprivileged people. I find it an incredibly offensive word. So I'm just going to go on my little soapbox for a second and say that there are only, in my opinion, my humble opinion, there's only two people that really can empower you. That is your boss, because he or she has power over you, and so they can give some of their power to you, the underling, right? And who else do you think can do that? Well, that is the answer. But the second person is your parent. I mean, maybe not today, because sometimes I wonder who runs my house, my daughter or me. But in theory, anyway, the parent can empower the child. But the only person who can empower is the individual. You can give me resources, you can give me money, you can give me advice, you can give me support, you can buy me dinner, all of those things, and maybe somehow that leads to my ability to empower myself. But organizations that say we empower women, I just think it's bullshit. And I think it just undermines women, undermines minorities. I mean, I know it's said in a really heartfelt way, but it's wrong. And it perpetuates this same kind of disempowerment that we as women need to be rescued. We don't. We just need opportunity. So here, let's look at the next one, and then we'll go through the answers. The brand, what it is not. Company name, company product, or the mission. What do you think brand is? An image. Experience. Anyone else? Purpose. Okay. Okay, great. All good. All right, let's hop over to value proposition. What it is not. Experience, impact, CV. Any alternative ideas of what it could be? That one got you stumped. What? Growth potential. Okay, good. The circle. What it is not. It's not a shape. It's not your friends. It's not support and validation. The next one, the mind-body. What it is not. It's not static. It's not disconnected. And it's not purely spiritual. And before I move on to the last one, the purpose of this exercise is really for those who I sit in a room with to really think about their preconceived notions over these areas and the way that they have governed themselves, the way they think about and navigate their worlds. And it is really important, I think, for organizations, and I think, Anne is such an excellent leader and said some amazing things in her opening remarks this morning, that it's critically important that this and many things like this should be headed up by your CEO and by your board. So last but not least, let's talk about the unconscious. What is it not? It's not inconsequential, and it doesn't mean you've passed out, and it's not the lock. So what are the answers? These are some answers. I won't say they're all the answers, but there's something for you to think about. The leader as the conductor, literally and figuratively. So this is really, really critically important in the startup world because you have to do everything, including clean the toilets, right? Now, although a lot of startup founders are really brilliant, they're not brilliant at everything, right? So you need to be able to attract great talent to work for nothing on a hope and a dream that you're going to crush it. So not only do you have to have great magnetism, not only do you have to have great knowledge and a great vision, you also have to be able to conduct the people you bring in, like an orchestra. And then together, as technicians here, you make a great product, right? And that requires certain skills in an individual that not all leaders have, because many leaders are narcissists, right? And the system, quite frankly, feeds on that, meaning that HR policies and financial policies within an organization create this situation where you get compensated for hitting certain milestones, but you don't get compensated for hitting those milestones in a certain way, you know? So this is very important to look at. So the leader as the conductor. The brand is you. You are the brand. Now, I say this to founders because as CEOs of their company, they go out to raise money. You can't say, this is my product right over here. No, the product is right here. You have to be in complete alignment with your product. You need to be the thought leader, the spokesperson. You need to emulate and live everything that your product is about. And we see that with the younger generation. If they find that a company is not congruent with what the product is about, then they will not purchase your product. And so as executives and employees within an organization, I believe personally that you are the brand. Now you may say, okay, I'm more than just the brand. You know, I might work at Travelers or I may work at C Prime, but that's not my full identity. My point is that you represent the brand. And I'm sure that the leaders of your company want you to represent the brand. That's why if you go on social media and you start talking and acting out of alignment with the brand, you get in trouble. So the key is for you to really understand that wherever you are in life, there is your personal brand, and that personal brand should be in alignment with your corporate brand. And a lot of people have left their businesses because they're like, I don't really give a shit about this company and what they do. I want to go work for a company that's making a difference. It's cleaning water, that's saving kids, that's transforming industries, because that's what your brand is about. You identify as a disruptor. You identify as a humanitarian. You identify, but if you don't know what you identify with because you're unconscious, then that's why you're at work and you're like maybe half-assing it. So you have to ask yourself, why am I half-assing it? Why am I not happy? The next one, the value proposition. Excavating the why, the vision, and impact. So I like to refer to it as the SEER. So again, if you're a founder, you really need to understand your value prop. And it's not just the value prop of the product, it's of you representing the founder. And I think this is incredibly important for all of you, because it is, and we'll talk about this, I think, in one of the next upcoming slides. All of you need to practice building a value prop elevator pitch. So what does that mean? You're in an elevator, someone turns to you and says, so Sarah, what do you do? Typically someone will say, oh, I'm Vice President of Engineering at Google. Oh, great, okay. So what you've done there is basically you've adopted your work title to define your value prop, but that's not your value prop. That's just a title. Because if you got fired as Vice President of Engineering tomorrow at Google, your value prop doesn't change. That's what you need to really understand. So if you don't know what it would be without a job and without a title, then you need to do some deep, 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 deep searching. Next, the circle. Team building, strategies, it's all about conduction. So the circle is really about bringing people together with different ideas who don't agree with you, and you have to be mature enough to be able to deal with all of that rejection, that your ideas kind of suck, and having people tell you that in order to create conduction, literally like an electricity, an energy, and be open to that. Your job is to be open to being challenged. Next one, mind-body. The mind-body, I really feel, when I went to Penn back in the day, I was a biological basis of behavior major before mind-body was even a thing. I mean, it was like not even an expression. And I really wanted to either be a brain surgeon or I wanted to be either a brain surgeon or I wanted to be a psychiatrist. But it was this idea of the impact of the body on the brain and the brain on the body. Because we create disease. We, as humans, create disease in our bodies through a lot of our psychological ailments. Cancer, heart attack. You know, typically it's very convenient. You're working like mad and then you get sick and you have to stop. And maybe when you stop, you reassess your life, you realize perhaps that you need to make a shift. If you're open to really exploring why things happen to you, you may actually see that there are some lessons in the experiences that you have dealt with in your lives. And if you look for that meaning, oftentimes people will say like, oh, a bad thing happened to me, God hates me, or a bad thing happened to me, I have bad luck. That's what my daughter says. I'm like, please don't say that, that's awful. Because it's perpetuating, like what she's doing, she's programming her brain right now. She's putting in those inputs. I attract bad luck. I attract bad. I've heard her say it at least 25 times this year. And that is so dangerous. We have to really, really be very conscious of and respect this mind-body connection. It's not just what we eat, it's not just how we treat our bodies and how we exercise or how we sleep, but it's also the way that we honor our bodies as energetic machines, literally. So we are an energetic being, which is why if you walk into a room, you know immediately, your body does, and you subconsciously do, whether it's a good room or a bad room, because we emit energy. So if you walk into a room with a lot of really great, awesome, positive, happy people, you're like, oh, I'm glad I came to this party. But if you walk into a room and it's Thanksgiving dinner and your relatives are there that you really can't stand, you're like, oh no. You know, and you go straight for the bar. And nothing has been said, right? Nothing has been said. I want you to think about this. Like, there is nothing that's been said. You just walk into a room and you're like, okay, this is good. Or, oh shit, here we go. So that is the mind-body connection. And that's why we all need to do that work. And I don't know if any of you do that work. It could be meditation, it could be just knowledge gathering at first, but your physical state impacts your frequency and what you vibrate as. And so does your emotion. That's why everyone here probably loves MC. MC, where are you? Can you raise your hand or stand up? I can't. There you are, okay. One of the happiest people I've ever met in my life. Always happy. Who doesn't want to take a call from MC, right? And joy is one of the highest vibrational energies you can have in your body in terms of megahertz. So it attracts like energy. So surround yourself with people who have that kind of great energy, and you need to get rid of the rest. So who are you? This is what I was talking about before, the I am statement. So important. If you get nothing else out of today, I want you to just, you know, when you're walking the dog, I want you to just say, I am. I am. Okay, so I want some volunteers to state your I am. Just say, I am whatever. Over here. This table right here. I am a developer. Anyone else?
I'm a team builder.
You're what?
I'm a team builder.
You're a team builder, okay? You guys have to know who you are. Come on.
I'm an enabler.
You're an enabler, okay?
I'm a survivor.
You're a survivor.
I'm awesome.
You're awesome. That's great. One more? A what? A nurturer. Got it. So I booked my session. She spent some time talking to me, and this is what she came up with for me. She said, "You're a visionary architect." And I was like, oh my God, I never could have found those words. And you know what's interesting about what she wrote here, which she says, you start with what's missing, then you identify the current model, you reimagine the model, then you create the new architecture, and then you implement the vision. And when I took this kind of algorithmic layout of who I am, and I superimposed it over my careers, it made perfect sense. Because if you know me, I've had very varied work background. So I spent many years in the entertainment business, but what did I do there? I simply sat in a room, people pitched me their ideas, and then I gave them feedback. I told them what was missing. It's a comedy, but it's very serious. It's a problem, right? We need more funny. No, but in seriousness, like, you spend a lot of time in development as head of development, really literally developing the material like you would a system, and tweaking it, and then once the written material is really great, then you cast it, and it can fall apart then. That's why sometimes you watch programs and you're like, great story, but I didn't really like the actor, or I didn't really like the chemistry. Incredibly important. So what's missing? Then when I went and decided to do my own independent work as a writer and a producer, it was really about exploring what I wanted to say and what I felt was missing in the entertainment space in terms of movies, in terms of stars, in terms of storylines. And then when I went and worked in the inner city and I sat across from clients, I was always seeking what is the missing piece? Because people, when they come in for therapy, they never tell you what's wrong with them. They'll come in and they'll say, oh, I have anxiety. Or they come in, or I'm flunking school, or whatever it may be. And then you turn out, as you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, if you know how to dig, that they are, a survivor, that they're being sexually molested at home, that they're, you get in there. But you need to understand what's missing, and then identify what currently is going on, and then what needs to be done to repair it. And then, of course, it's very obvious in the work that I'm doing, and in launching We Global, it was very much this. What is wrong with our startup ecosystem, and why is it so hard for women to start businesses? Why is it that 97% of women around the world get no support? Can you just sit with that? And I have 2 girls. It's not going to fly. So we're on a mission to change that. So I show this to you not because I'm special. I show this to you because I want you to think about your own architectural map of who you are and how that really relates to the work you've done and perhaps the work you want to do going forward. So the human psyche. I love this picture, especially given my prior history in the hacking world. I will have you know that in 1999, when I left the business and I decided I was going to write my sci-fi novel, because I take my work so seriously, everything I write, I research, I decided the only way to write science fiction about a cyber superhero who battles viruses on the net, 100 years in the future when the Earth has ceased to exist, and now we're in a different parallel universe, I was like, I need to go to a hacker convention, clearly. So I drove up to Vegas and I went to DEF CON, and back then it was pretty hardcore, and I didn't know what to expect. So I wore my not my cowboy boots. That would have been for the Idaho trip. I wore my steel tip work boots and my fatigues and my black tee, and I was looking kind of tough. And I pull up to the desk, and then I register, and they only took cash, because obviously they don't want anybody to know who's there. So I was like, I had my cash, I had been forewarned, and then they asked me, who are you with? And I stopped, and I was like, well, I'm not with anybody. But I was like, I'm solo. And literally, like, at the table, there were like 20 people registering. They all stopped, and they looked at me like I had just said the biggest racial slur. And they all go, wow. And I had no idea why. So, but I figured it out. Then I entered, I spent the weekend with all of these folks. It was probably one of the most amazing conferences I went to. And I found out that everybody goes in teams because part of the highlight of the conference, not like this one, they spend the entire weekend trying to take down a big server like Microsoft's. And it's a big competition. And the winner gets a big prize, and they show up with all their hackers, and they've got like, you know, the Red Bulls from Indiana. It's like a sports team. And I showed up by myself, so they thought, wow, she must be super talented. Yeah, fake it till you make it. That's the key, fake it till you make it. So the human psyche, hacking the code. I love this picture because we as human beings, we think that we're just, you know, flesh and blood, and we bleed, we cry, we need sleep, we need alcohol, we need coffee, right? But inside, we're very complex machines. And you, of all people, can appreciate this because there's so many Scrum Masters in the room. I think I saw on the list at least like 25. We have inputs and we have outputs, just like a computer. And our inputs are many times planted there by our environment. So who do you think, let's just spitball for a second, a couple different individuals or a couple different entities that you think in your own life had major role in your inputting? Any? What? Your best friend. Your parents. Coach, teachers. Children. Anyone else? Siblings. You're 100% right. Also your boss, your work environment, your school environment, your culture, your ethnicity. All of those are inputs. One of my inputs from the time I was a little girl, my mother would always say, by the way, my mom was a single mom, my father was a professional soccer player in Portugal, immigrated to the United States before soccer was even a thing here, ended up giving up his career and working in a factory, and was always really resentful. He was a really, really good-looking guy who had like 20,000 girlfriends in Portugal, and now he was married, working in a factory with a little kid, right? Who wouldn't be bitter? So when I think about our inputs and what impacts us, I think about growing up and things that I remember from growing up. So if you can remember certain things, there is a strong likelihood that it's had a profound subconscious, if not conscious, impact on your life. So one of the things I remember, my mother would say to me, who definitely didn't read Dr. Spock at all, she would say, Nanda, because that was my family name, Nanda, men are no good. Literally like every day. Men are no good. Men are no good, Nanda. Men are no good, you know. She had a lot of great isms, but that was one of them. So the other thing that was interesting, because my mother got pregnant the first time she had sex with my dad, lucky woman, she said, or my dad said, you know, I don't want you to ever have sex. You know, and he basically kept me like in a box, kind of like Rapunzel, like I was allowed to go to school, I wasn't allowed to go to parties. You know, the first time I had a boyfriend, he could only sit outside of the steps of the house. First time he saw the boy kiss me on the lips, he like slapped me across the face, dragged me in the house and said, you will never leave again. So I actually wrote a book at one point called Chastity Girl, because that's how I felt. But how ironic that when I was a grown woman, I couldn't get pregnant. I could not get pregnant. If I told you my pregnancy stories, you would cry. And I sometimes think, did that somehow have an impact on me? I don't know. I don't know. I had plenty of miscarriages. My firstborn passed away. Like, parenting for me came so hard and late. And sometimes I wonder, okay. And then I got divorced. And I realized, and I was married for 17 years, and I realized that I did believe that men are no good in my heart. What does that really mean? It means like you're waiting to get screwed. It's kind of like, is he lying? And my mother was correct. I mean, she wasn't wrong in saying that because, you know, my dad was a philanderer. They owned a coffee shop in Portugal. 95% of all the guys who actually went to the coffee shop and were there with girls were not their wives. There was their girlfriends, and we would have to lie on the phone, be like, Tony, your wife wants you to go home, you know? So it was just part of our culture. So she was just warning me, right? But what ends up happening is then you expect it, and then you manifest it. Which is why that story about working at Animo Inglewood is true. If you expect it, you manifest it, if you set the expectation. So that's why I don't like my daughter to say, I have bad luck. You expect it, you manifest it. So you have to ask yourselves, what disempowering things do you say that perhaps came from your childhood, came from your culture, that aren't serving you? So this is what we were just talking about. These are the different parts of our lives that have huge impact on who we are. These are the inputs. Some of them were voluntary choices, like where you went to school perhaps, who your friends are perhaps. Others are not. You were born into a certain religion, you were born into a certain culture, you were born into a certain family. But it has impacted us, positive and negative, tremendously. And when you talk about human innovation, you can't innovate as a human unless first you dig to understand what are the inputs so that you can assess the outputs. The problem is everyone is focused on the outputs and not touching the inputs. Now, you would never try to redesign a computer system without understanding the inputs, right? Makes no sense whatsoever. So these are some of the, you know, fabulous things that perhaps some of us have heard. You can do better. You'll never amount to anything. You don't deserve it. Money does not grow on trees, and life is hard. I heard that one a lot. You have to work hard. You have to work hard. And my parents did. They worked 2 jobs, barely made ends meet. But, you know, they put me through great school, and I built a great career, and I'm so ever grateful for the sacrifices that they made, and they didn't have the opportunities that we have currently. And I recently heard a lecture by John Assaraf, who I love and follow and recommend highly. And he was talking about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is cross-cultural psychology. And if you're ever curious about this, there are books that have been written. And if you when I was getting my psych degree, we had to read one. And I went to the chapter that was all about the Portuguese, because I'm Portuguese. And honest to God, I read those 30 pages about the Portuguese culture, and I was like, who is this guy? He's not Portuguese, but he nailed the culture. Nailed it. And you could read a chapter on African Americans. You could read a chapter on Hawaiians. I mean, it was incredible how different. And the reason that's important is because as a therapist, you need to go into a room and have context of who that person is that you're trying to work with. And you can't just recommend certain kinds of strategies across the board to all humans. But it is really important for us to understand that these cultural tendencies, this lineage that we carry that's in our genes, is something that sometimes is a big positive, but can also be a big negative. So exploration of your own operating system is critical to being able to really deliver your own transformation as a person. So building new pathways. I have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to have to speed through this. This is what I do a lot of work on with our founders, and I'm going to say that if there's anything you jot down, or take a picture, is to jot this down because it's incredibly important. So first one is mindset. So your mindset is really impacted hugely in one of the later points around your belief system. So your mindset may be, if you work hard, good things happen. Or your mindset may be, like my daughter's, you know, bad things always happen to me, it doesn't matter what I do. You can have an empowering mindset, or you can have a disempowering mindset. So you have to choose. Now, everyone's going to choose an empowering mindset, right? But it's not the choosing that's important. What's important is to build the strategies that feed that growth mindset or an empowering mindset. So the first thing is to really think about your clarity of vision and to really hone in on what meaning you assign to things. So the meaning that you assign to things, we typically assign negative meaning. Oh, she ignored me in that meeting, or he didn't, you know, answer my question, or he hasn't responded to my email, or so-and-so was kind of rude to me. I had one advisor yesterday send me a message and say, so-and-so, who's on our advisory board, I don't really think she's that engaged in We Global. And I was like, why? She said, well, I was at an event, and she was 2 people over from me, and she never even spoke to me. And I was like, I don't think she knows who you are. And I said, we've had 2 advisory board meetings on Zoom, and she probably doesn't know who you are because there's like 30 people on a call. But we assign immediate negative meaning, and that is telling. It's not telling because you're good or you're bad at all. It's just a hint that, I wonder why I do that. Where does that come from? And then you have to go back and see where that started. And then you have to address it. Another thing is empowering actions, communications, pictures. Really important that you surround yourself and that you surround yourself with positive imagery. And it's also really important that you speak and you communicate in a way that's incredibly empowering. So let's all remove the word hope from our vocabulary, because hope says there's a possibility that you're going to fail. You can have faith. There's an expression in Portuguese that says, in Portugal, anything you do is followed by the following words, se Deus quiser, which means if God wills it. So I'll see you tomorrow, se Deus quiser. I'm going to the bathroom, se Deus quiser. You know, I mean, everything you do, big or small. You know, I got a big deal, I'm going to go get that money, se Deus quiser. So you are making this acknowledgement that you are pursuing something, but there's a higher force that can decide yay or nay, right? But we need to really be very, very positive with our intentions and be focused on what we're going to get and not be shamed by doing so. Because we all experience great shame in being bold. Because you know why? Because our culture doesn't like braggers. And I think that's bullshit. And I think women suffer from this hugely. That's why women are like, well, I think we could, right? Because they don't want to be pointed out and say, well, Betty, you said you were going to do X, and it's April 1st, and you haven't done Y, so, like, what's up? Next, focus and beliefs. At one point, I decided I wanted to be a motorcycle rider because I was writing a movie about women who went cross-country on a motorcycle. So what did I decide? I needed to learn how to ride. So I went through the training, et cetera, et cetera. And while I was doing the training, they told this story, which I tell all the time because I think it's so true. He said, if you're on a motorcycle and you're going down the street and you see a tree and you're worried that you're going to hit the tree, do not look at the tree. And everyone was like, why? Because if you look at the tree, you turn to the tree, your bars will turn to the tree, and you'll hit the tree. It's a metaphor for life. What you focus on, you manifest. If you want to be president of your company, but you're obsessed with the fact that Bob, who's the VP, is playing golf, or Jill with the president all the time, and you're really in a negative headspace, and you continue to be in that underling mindset, you're never going to be president. Because if you want to be president, you need to think like a president, and you need to act like a president while you're still a secretary. And that means being bold. And then lastly, I'll whip through these. Your energy optimization has to be key. So that means that you have to put out high vibration all the time so you attract great things to you. So if you want to be around happy people, you need to be happy. If you want to be generous and you want to receive generosity, you need to be generous. And it is a flow that happens, and it is empowered by and driven by your own behavior. And of course, we have to be grateful for what we have all the time. And language and meaning is critically important. What you say, words have power. They have real power. That's why I make bold statements all the time that make people on my team cringe, because they think you're nobody, you're a startup founder, we're raising capital, why are you making these bold statements? Because you can never hit a mark if you are really striving for a low bar. It's not the way you do it. And Guards of Fornax is from my book. Fornax was a moon that housed the prison in my book. And you need to guard Fornax, which means you need to make sure you don't let people into your world who are negative and disempower you. And if you're stuck with them because it's your mother or it's your father, then you need to drink heavily. No, I'm kidding. Then you need to surround yourself with really positive people so you have an antidote to that negative energy. But so many of us have people in our lives that don't serve us and don't serve our big dreams. And then I'll close on this. You have to reverse engineer your life like you would a system. Break it down, rebuild it. If you know that you want to achieve a certain goal for yourself, I often ask people to write their obituary and then reverse engineer it. What do you want them to say about you when you're dead? Are you on that path? And if you're not, you better get on the path. Because as we saw, the world is not a given all the time. And you need to write your own life movie. So I love this one because it came from Hollywood. If you were a movie and you were the star of the movie, what actor are you in, and what is the story about? With that, I want to thank you so much. It was so great to be here.